Morning. Thank you for being here this morning. Last week we did a very different style for our morning service, and I've received two different forms of feedback. There were people that liked it and people that did not, and the ones that didn't had some pretty good reasons for why not. We won't be doing that format very often, if ever again. It will be ever again, but not very often. This morning, though, the new teaching style that we will be discussing with one another is about Jesus teaching in parables. Now, the thing that's different about this teaching style that we're going to look at this morning is the way that it works as a teacher to use parables. That means that we're not going to be looking at a bunch of different parables. We're going to be looking at what it means to speak in parables, to teach with them, or preach with them. I've gotten a lot of the commentary from a couple of books that I've got. One that I had to steal back from Damon because I lent it to him as we're going through some parables on Wednesday night. And I gave it to him and immediately had to get it back from him within a week. Say, hey, I forgot I had to have it for this sermon. So all of the references have been pulled from these books. We'll start in John chapter 3. In the first verse of John chapter 3, now there was a man of the Pharisees named Nicodemus, a ruler of the Jews. This man came to Jesus by night and said to him, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. Jesus answered him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. It's kind of like a parable that Jesus uses here in this verse. It is something that is like something else. The word for parable is an anglicized form of a Greek word, parabole. Derives from the Greek verb which means to place beside or cast alongside. A parable is a story which places one thing beside another for the purposes of teaching. It is a comparison, putting the known beside the unknown. Memorably expressed, it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Putting one thing alongside of another thing. Last week and weeks before are terrific examples of that. That's why I've brought them up. Well, the way that the order of our service went last week can be put alongside other services like the one that we've gone through today. We've got two songs, opening prayer, song Lord's Supper, song preaching, song go home. And anything else that's different, you can say, we'll lay it alongside that and compare one with another. One of the difficult things to work with in parables is understanding that not everyone is going to understand. Let's read from Matthew 13. Then the disciples came to him and said, Why do you speak to them in parables? He answered them, To you it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear. Jesus speaks in parables so that people cannot understand him. Reading from Parables of Jesus on page 7, Matthew records Jesus' shocking response. Jesus used parables because it has not been given to them to know the kingdom secrets. They are the have-nots. I am taking away what they have. No matter how plainly I speak or act, they refuse to see and hear. They are like Isaiah's audience, blind and deaf, and will therefore receive judgment instead of healing. In other words, I'm ready to punish them, so I'm taking away their good sense. To support his claim, Jesus quotes from Isaiah chapter 6, starting around verse 9 and continuing. It is difficult for us to understand, I think, because we want so many people to understand the gospel, to come to find Jesus the way that we have found him, a sacrifice for our souls, and to look into his teaching and to understand what he's wanting us to know. But Jesus says plainly, he's teaching in parables because they don't get it, and he's just not going to spoon feed them anymore. It won't work anyway. They're not going to receive it. They won't listen. Matthew 13, starting in 14, indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled that says, you will indeed hear, but never understand. And you will indeed see, but never perceive. For this people's heart has grown dull, and with their ears they can barely hear, and with their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. One of the books I'm quoting from is Stories with Intent. That Jesus is saying these things with an intention. It's not just a beside. Jesus intentionally says things like this, and they sound really bad. It may be words in red, but in some ways it feels like it's really bad. Jesus is saying, I'm just not going to give them anymore. We have to look back at proverbs that we have, such as, don't cast your pearls before the swine. And in some cases, we should understand and cope with the fact that some people are never going to. They're never going to internalize the Word of God. They're never going to listen to the things that you say. They're never going to open their heart to the Bible. And while that's terrible, the reason that it's terrible is because of the individual who will not open their ears, not because of a God who hasn't tried. The Son of God was not interested in forcing down the throats of unbelieving men what they positively did not want. The great shepherd was calling only to those who would hear his voice and follow him. To the rest, his words would simply be gobbled-gook, not because it was, but because their carnal ears had no spiritual frequency. I really like this quotation because of a word, or two words really. Spiritual frequencies. You thought I was going to say gobbledygook. Spiritual frequencies, when you turn in, now, y'all, a lot of these people don't understand they don't get it, Roger. Used to, you had to turn the dial to the frequency of the radio station, not hit scan left or scan right. And if you got it just off to the side, you got the song you wanted to hear and to go along with it. And the way that it's being described in this book about parables that Jesus has preached is they can't tune him in. They can't receive on the radio. They're just not going to pick it up. That's terrible. Parables make up about 35% of Jesus' teaching in the synoptics. It's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. In a technical sense, there are no parables in John. John doesn't use the word parable, but he uses the word, that one, often just translated as proverb or dark saying, and he uses it 4 times. At this point, I would like to look with you at a couple. Where are we at? My paper is out of frequency. When Jesus tells a story, he tells it for a specific reason. He has an agenda. There is something that he wants to convey, and he's going to do it in a parable. The teller thinks that the story is important, or the story would never be told. The question for each parable is, how did God seek to change attitudes and behaviors with this parable? I'm not sure how to illustrate this. I thought of a couple of ways, and I'm not sure any of them worked or will work, but I'll try, and then you'll have to forgive me. So if you'll look at any other man in this room, and you'll put him up alongside of me, and you can judge for yourself how tall we are, and that one of us compares to another, that we both have height in relation to each other and as judged against. Which is the youngest baby that can walk in here? Probably Reed. That can walk? Ford. We'll go with Ford. Both of us are taller than Ford. So you definitely don't want Ford's height at the middle or end of your life. It's a good starting one, though. But if you'll compare the two men, they have attributes, and they don't look like anything else, but they look like this. And now you take one of them away, and just take me. You say, he's a man, he's about as tall as you, but he's several inches shorter. He's a man, he's like you, but he's several pounds lighter. He's a man, he's like you, but he's much more good looking. Then what you have is one thing that is cast alongside of something else, and that you can picture it. Now, how you're going to picture somebody better looking, I have no idea. Jesus' parables need to be allowed to speak, and they need to be heard. Some parable is as clear as bells. And while we may discuss nuances and backgrounds in length, they do not need explanation so much as implementation. And now I've caught back up to my notes. Let's consider the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's found in Luke chapter 10 and verses 25 through 37. For those of you who are going to trust the screen, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among robbers who stripped him and beat him and departed, leaving him half dead. When we're looking at parables, we need to judge, what is Jesus trying to communicate on the most basic level? What does what does Jesus want us to do with this parable? Do we have to dig very deep to understand the parable and then make comparisons to our lives? What is Jesus trying to commit to our memories on the most basic level? The second and greatest command is this, to love your neighbor. What does Jesus want us to do with the parable of the Good Samaritan? He wants us to overlook our preconceived notions of people and see people the way that he sees them. Do we have to dig very deep to understand that? No. That's pretty simple. In fact, if you miss that part of the parable, you don't understand the concept of God. And while none of us can put God in a box and say he's exactly like this, one of his defining features, yes, the one that is the best defining feature of God, is that he is there to heal, to make whole those who have been abused by this world and fallen prey to the schemes and connivings thereof. What about the pearl of great value? Matthew chapter 13, it's 2 whole verses. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value went and sold all that he had and bought it. What's Jesus trying to communicate on the most basic level? That the kingdom of heaven is worth anything and everything that you have. What does Jesus want us to do with this information? He wants us to value the kingdom of heaven above everything else in this life. Do Do we have to dig very deep to understand it? No. You know what we have to dig very deep for? Our guts, our spine, our hard-headedness. While it is so easy to understand this parable, that Jesus is offering something through His blood in reaching the Father that is so simple it comes as a free gift for us to receive if we will only stretch out our hand and take it. And yet that's the hardest thing of all to do. To admit to ourselves that we're not going to make it to heaven on any standing that we may have or by any work that we commit ourselves to. That we cannot righteous our way into heaven. We have to lean on what He has given us, what He will give us. But will we sell everything in this life for the home of heaven? Why did Jesus teach with parables? When God sees fit to punish a man, He first takes away his good sense. A shocking bit of homespun wisdom by some guy that this guy quoted. Yet it is an accurate expression of Jesus' response when He used parables. Most believe Jesus used parables to get down on His audience's level, to connect with them where they live, clarify His message. That explanation, however, is the exact opposite of Jesus' explanation. If parables are clarified, why did the apostles ask what this one meant? Why did they question Jesus' use of parables at all? If parables are so simple, why does Jesus say it's too hard for some people to get? Because it's more difficult to understand. It's backwards in thinking. If you want to be the greatest, then you have to what? Be the least. If you want to be the more powerful, what do you need to do in this life? Show meekness. And if you turn to the 5th chapter of Matthew, there are that and like a dozen more sayings of Jesus that are just as upside down as those were. Jesus calls for us to be upside down in this world so that we would be right side up in heaven. Jesus' teachings do not bring Him down and make Him more relatable. They take what we know and show us what He says heaven looks like. Who's qualified to do that except the one that came down from heaven to begin with? It's prophesied that the Messiah, the coming one, the righteous one, the Holy One of God, would speak this way. Psalm 78, 2nd verse reads, I will open my mouth with a parable. I will utter hidden things from of old. Just as a side point, if you'll look up several different versions of this verse in different translations, that last portion there, things from of old, is actually translated as dark sayings. It's a very peculiar phrase. I'm giving you this for one reason. Not because it's super important. I'm giving it to you because if you want to study what I'm talking about now in more depth, look up dark sayings in this way. You'll find a number of things that are difficult to understand, some that might help us to be more educated. In Matthew 13, Jesus says all these things, Matthew writes, all these things Jesus said to the crowds in parables. Indeed, He said nothing to them without a parable. This was to fulfill what was spoken of by the prophet. I will open my mouth in parables. I will utter what has been hidden since the foundation of the world. If you went to church every day with a preacher that you didn't know what he was talking about, how long would you stay with him? Drew said, I don't know, about 6.5 years so far. If I bag on you hard enough, I'll give you one, man. I love you. Thank you. If you didn't understand him, you'd quit going. Eventually. And Jesus is doing the same thing. He's talking in parables and things that that they don't understand. He's describing to them how the kingdom of heaven is different from this world. How that sin makes such mud of the things here that are so clean there. And he's talking to them in words that we say we understand, and I think maybe all of us here might. But it's so different from what they know that they say things like, and when he spoke as one who had authority. That he could tell us what heaven's like. He could show you with earthly words things that heaven is kind of like. He's doing it in parables so that the people that don't want to understand, so that they'll go away. So that they'll leave us alone. Teachers, how nice would it be to get the bad kids out of your classroom? Don't answer. And yet there is some warrant to that with what Jesus is doing in speaking in parables. The key to knowing when to stop interpreting, as with the metaphor, parable interpretation is about understanding the limits, the significance of the analogy. The words that Jesus uses makes it easy for no one. If you don't know the rest of the Bible, how can you say that Jesus is talking about this verse over here or that verse over there? Do you think that any of the Gentiles that were around knew that Jesus was quoting from Isaiah chapter 6? They never read that book. They didn't know those things. And so we will end in the same place where we started. Come back with me to John chapter 3, if you would. In John chapter 3, we'll start at verse 3, because that's where we ended. Jesus answered him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of heaven." Nicodemus said to him, I want to pause one more time. This guy is not a low-level priest. This guy is a member of the ruling class of Jewish society. He's one of the top dogs. And Nicodemus does not understand what Jesus has put down beside something else. And Jesus says, like it was when you were born, you need to become like that. Like it is being born, you need to do that. Nicodemus says to him, verse 4, "How can a man be born when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born?" Those of us who have read this or studied this, we already know Nicodemus is looking in the wrong direction. Imagine opening up to every parable that Jesus taught, 35% of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and not understanding what he had to say. Jesus tells him to be born again. Nicodemus doesn't understand how. And in verse 5, Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you are born of the water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh. That which is born of spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again."